The coffee cup shattered across the marble floor because Emma's hands wouldn't stop, trembling from the night her detective boyfriend had choked her unconscious. Antonio Marchetti's storm gray eyes weren't fixed on the mess spreading across his expensive shoes. They were locked on the purple fingerprints her silk scarf had failed to conceal. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The coffee cup slipped from my trembling fingers before I could even process what was happening. Time seemed to stretch and distort as I watched the white porcelain tumble through the air, dark liquid arcing in a perfect spiral before crashing across the pristine white tablecloth. The sound of shattering ceramic cut through the ambient noise of Rosie's Italian restaurant like a gunshot. And suddenly every eye in the dining room was on me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. They hadn't stopped for 3 days, not since Marcus had grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against our apartment wall, his fingers digging into my windpipe until black spots danced across my vision. The bruises had faded to a sickly yellow-green that I'd tried desperately to conceal with makeup and a silk scarf, but the internal damage lingered. Every time I tried to grip something, my fingers would spasm involuntarily, my body's way of remembering trauma even when my mind tried to push it away. "I'm so sorry." The words tumbled out in a panicked rush as I grabbed napkins from the adjacent table, my vision blurring with tears I couldn't afford to shed. "I'm so incredibly sorry, sir. I'll get you a fresh cup immediately. Please, I'm so sorry." The man sitting at table 12 didn't move. He simply watched me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. Most customers would have been angry by now, demanding to speak with my manager or making loud complaints about incompetent service. But this man remained perfectly still, his storm gray eyes tracking my frantic movements with the focused attention of a predator studying wounded prey. I'd noticed him the moment he walked through Rosie's front door 20 minutes earlier. It was impossible not to. Everything about him commanded attention, from the way he moved with fluid confidence through the crowded dining room to the expensive Italian suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made people instinctively step aside to let him pass. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and controlled power. But it was his eyes that truly unsettled me. They were the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes, and they missed nothing. Antonio Marchetti. That's what the reservation book had said when I'd checked the evening seating arrangements. Table 12 at 8 o'clock, party of 1. My manager Tony had pulled me aside specifically to tell me I'd be serving Mr. Marchetti tonight, his voice carrying an edge of nervousness I'd never heard before. "Be professional, be efficient, and whatever you do, don't ask questions. Mr. Marchetti values his privacy." The warning had seemed odd at the time, but I'd been too focused on making it through my shift without having a complete breakdown to think much about it. 3 months of waitressing at Rosie's had taught me that Chicago's upscale dining scene attracted all kinds of wealthy eccentrics who preferred not to be bothered with small talk. Antonio Marchetti was probably just another corporate executive or hedge fund manager who wanted to eat his overpriced pasta in peace. Except everything about the way he carried himself suggested he was something far more dangerous than a businessman. "Stop it, Emma." The words echoed in my head in my mother's practical voice. "You're being paranoid. Not everyone is a threat." But my psychology degree and 2 years of studying criminal behavior patterns before I'd been forced to drop out of graduate school had trained me to recognize certain tells. The way Marchetti sat with his back to the wall, positioning himself for a clear view of both entrances. How his eyes continuously swept the room in calculated patterns, cataloging faces and potential threats with military precision. The expensive watch on his wrist that probably concealed more than just time-telling capability. The subtle bulge beneath his left shoulder that suggested either a very thick wallet or something considerably more concerning. I was so lost in my observations that I didn't realize I was still apologizing until his voice cut through my rambling. "Stop." Just the single word, delivered in a tone that made it clear he was accustomed to being obeyed. His accent carried hints of something European, though I couldn't quite place it. Roman, perhaps, or Sicilian. I froze, wadded napkins clutched in my hands, coffee still dripping from the edge of his table onto the polished hardwood floor. My entire body had gone rigid with the instinctive response of someone who'd learned that freezing sometimes prevented further violence. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Slowly I raised my eyes to meet his, every survival instinct screaming at me to look away, to maintain submissive body language that wouldn't trigger an aggressive response. Marcus had taught me that lesson well. Eye contact was defiance. Defiance meant punishment, but Antonio Marchetti wasn't Marcus. When our eyes met, I saw something shift in his expression. The predatory focus remained, but it had been joined by something else. Concern? No, that couldn't be right. Men like him didn't feel concern for clumsy waitresses who spilled coffee on their expensive suits. "Your hands are shaking." It was an observation, not an accusation. "Why?" The direct question caught me completely off guard. "Because I dropped your coffee?" I tried for humor, attempted a self-deprecating smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "I'm really sorry about that. I'll have a fresh cup for you in just a moment, and of course there will be no charge for your meal." His eyes narrowed slightly, and I watched him process information with the rapid calculation of someone trained to read. Before I could move away, his hand shot out with surprising speed, catching my wrist in a grip that was firm but not painful. I flinched anyway, my body's automatic response to being grabbed, and felt heat flood my cheeks with embarrassment. The scarf. His voice had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that somehow demanded more attention than shouting. It shifted when you bent down. I can see the bruising on your neck. Ice flooded through my vein. My free hand flew to my throat, adjusting the silk scarf that had been carefully arranged to conceal the worst of the damage. It's nothing, I'm fine. Just clumsy, as you've already witnessed. Someone put their hands on you. It wasn't a question. The temperature in the immediate vicinity of table 12 seemed to have dropped several degrees, and I noticed that Marchetti's grip on my wrist had tightened fractionally. Who? I need to get back to work. I tried to pull away, but he held firm. Sir, please. If my manager sees me standing here instead of serving tables, I'll lose this job. And I can't afford to lose this job. That seemed to penetrate through whatever protective instinct had been triggered. He released my wrist immediately, sitting back in his chair with controlled grace. But his eyes never left my face, conducting an assessment that felt like being studied under a microscope. I'm Antonio Marchetti, and you are? Emma? My voice came out barely above a whisper. Emma Carson. Well, Emma Carson, here's what's going to happen. You're going to bring me a fresh coffee in my usual order. The osso buco. You're going to stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. And then when your shift ends, you're going to let me buy you dinner while you tell me who put those marks on your throat. The audacity of the statement left me momentarily speechless. I don't even know you, and I definitely can't accept dinner invitations from customers against restaurant policy. One corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been I own 40% of this restaurant, Emma. I think I can override policy when necessary. That explained Tony's nervousness and the cryptic warnings about privacy. Antonio Marchetti wasn't just another wealthy customer. He was a partial owner, which meant he had the power to fire me with a single word if I continued to refuse his requests. But more concerning was the way he looked at the bruises on my neck. I'd seen that expression before in the mirror after particularly bad nights with Marcus. The cold calculation of someone planning violence. And while everything about Antonio Marchetti suggested he was more than capable of extreme violence, I had the disturbing sense that his fury wasn't directed at me. I should say no. Every rational thought in my head screamed that accepting dinner with a man like Antonio Marchetti was dangerous. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at me, something that recognized trauma because he'd seen it before, maybe even experienced it himself. I'll think about it, I heard myself say, the words emerging before I could stop them. First, let me get you that coffee, and this time I promise not to wear it. His expression softened slightly, the predatory intensity giving way to something almost human. I'll hold you to that promise, Emma Carson. I fled to the safety of the kitchen on legs that felt disconnected from my body, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers for. Who was Antonio Marchetti really? Why had he noticed details about me that most people overlook? And why did part of me desperately want to accept his dinner invitation despite every logical reason to refuse? Behind me, I could feel his gaze following my movements, tracking me through the crowded dining room with the same focused attention he'd applied to everything else. For the first time in 3 days, my hands had stopped shaking, but I wasn't sure if that was because I felt safer or because I'd just stumbled into something far more dangerous than Marcus's violence. Tony found me in the kitchen prep area, frantically making a fresh espresso with hands that were finally steady. You okay? His voice carried genuine concern mixed with curiosity. Mr. Marchetti isn't upset about the spill, is he? No. I kept my attention focused on the espresso machine, watching dark liquid stream into a clean white cup. He was very understanding about it. Good. Tony hesitated, clearly wanting to say more but unsure how to proceed. Look, Emma, Mr. Marchetti is an important client. Very important. If he asks you for anything at all, you accommodate him. Understand? The warning was clear. Antonio Marchetti held power in ways that went far beyond partial restaurant ownership. Power that made my manager nervous enough to give implicit permission for whatever might happen between us. Power that suggested connections I was better off not knowing about. I understand. The coffee was ready. Perfect temperature, perfect foam. I arranged it on a serving tray with the careful precision of someone trying to maintain control over at least one aspect of their chaotic life. I won't disappoint him. As I carried the fresh coffee back through the dining room toward table 12, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the decorative mirrors that lined Rosie's walls. I looked pale and fragile, the kind of woman who'd let a man put bruises around her throat and hadn't found the courage to leave, the kind of woman who was about to have dinner with a dangerous stranger because something in his eyes suggested he understood violence in ways that both terrified and comforted me. Antonio Marchetti watched me approach with that same intense focus, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. When I set the coffee down in front of him with hands that remained perfectly steady, our eyes met, and something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, or the acknowledgement that we were both damaged people drawn together by circumstances neither of us fully understood. Your osso buco will be ready shortly. My voice sounded more confident than I felt. Is there anything else I can get you right now? Just your answer about dinner. His tone was casual, but his eyes held mine with an intensity that made breathing difficult. 8 o'clock, when your shift ends. There's a private dining room upstairs. We can talk without being interrupted, and if I say no, then I'll respect your decision. He took a sip of his coffee, and I watched something like approval flicker across his features. But Emma, Those marks on your neck tell me you need help. And whatever you might think about me, I'm very good at solving problems that involve men who hurt women. The casual way he delivered what sounded distinctly like a threat sent chills down my spine. This was a man who dealt in violence as easily as most people dealt in conversation. But there was a difference between Marcus's violence, which came from a need to dominate and control, and the cold precision I sensed in Antonio Marchetti. His violence would be purposeful, surgical, designed to eliminate threats rather than create them. 8 o'clock, I heard myself agree. Private dining room upstairs. His smile was dangerous and beautiful, like watching lightning split a dark sky. Excellent. Now go take care of your other tables before your manager has a heart attack from watching us talk. I'll behave myself until you're off the clock. I turned away before he could see how his words affected me, before he could notice that for the first time in 3 days I felt something other than fear and despair. It might have been hope, or it might have been the recognition that I was trading one dangerous situation for another, this time with a man whose power and connections could either save me or destroy me completely. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of automatic movements and distracted thoughts. I served tables, took orders, delivered food, and cleaned up spills with the mechanical efficiency of someone whose mind was elsewhere. Every few minutes my eyes would drift toward table 12, where Antonio Marchetti sat with the patience of someone who always got what he wanted and knew it was just a matter of time. What had I just agreed to? 8 o'clock arrived with the inevitability of a storm that had been building all evening. I stood in the employee bathroom staring at my reflection in the mirror while my hands gripped the edge of the sink hard enough to make my knuckles white. The scarf around my neck suddenly felt suffocating, but removing it would expose the full extent of Marcus's handiwork. Purple and yellow bruises that formed a necklace of violence, each fingerprint clearly visible against my pale skin. "What are you doing, Emma?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. I was about to have dinner with a man who radiated danger the way normal people radiated warmth, a man whose very presence made experienced criminals nervous, if Tony's reaction was any indication, a man who'd looked at the bruises on my neck and promised to solve problems involving men who hurt women. The smart thing would be to leave through the back entrance, go home to my tiny studio apartment and pretend tonight never happened. But home meant eventually facing Marcus, who had a key I'd been too afraid to take back. Home meant lying awake, listening for his footsteps in the hallway, wondering if tonight would be the night his anger escalated beyond choking. I adjusted my scarf one final time, touched up my lipstick with shaking hands, and made my way toward the stairs that led to Rosie's private dining rooms. The restaurant had mostly cleared out, only a few lingering couples finishing their desserts and wine. Through the kitchen doors I could hear the staff beginning their closing, the familiar sounds of dishes clattering and low conversations providing a comforting backdrop to my mounting anxiety. The private dining room was at the end of a hallway lined with photographs of old Chicago, images of the city from the 1920s when men in sharp suits controlled entire neighborhoods through violence and influence. The irony wasn't lost on me as I raised my hand to knock on the heavy oak door. "It's open." Antonio's voice carried through the wood, and I took one more steadying breath before pushing inside. The room was smaller than I'd expected, intimate rather than ostentatious. A single table had been set for two, complete with fresh flowers, flickering candles, and wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But what caught my attention was Antonio himself. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolled up his shirt sleeves, and looked somehow more dangerous in the casual disarray than he had in full formal attire. It was like seeing a predator at rest, the momentary relaxation only serving to highlight the coiled power waiting beneath the surface. "You came." He stood as I entered, pulling out a chair with old-world courtesy that seemed at odds with everything else about him. "I wasn't certain you would." I wasn't certain I would either. The honesty surprised us both, but here you are. He poured wine into 2 glasses with practiced ease, the movements of someone comfortable with expensive things and formal rituals. "Are you hungry?" I took the liberty of ordering several dishes. "If nothing appeals to you, I can have the kitchen prepare something else." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. "I'm not very hungry, actually. My stomach has been in knots all evening." Because of dinner with me? Or because of whatever happened 3 days ago that left those marks on your neck? I took a long sip of wine, letting the rich Barolo warm my throat where Marcus's fingers had squeezed. Both, if I'm being honest. I don't make a habit of having dinner with customers, or with men who look at me the way you do. And how do I look at you, Emma? Like you're trying to solve a puzzle. Like you can see things I'm trying desperately to hide. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, wine and exhaustion lowering my usual defenses. "It's unsettling. I've been told I have an intense stare." He settled into his chair with fluid grace, those storm gray eyes never leaving my face. "It's a hazard of my profession. I've learned to read people, to spot the things they don't want noticed." And what profession would that be? The question had been burning in my mind since he'd touched my wrist and made his dinner invitation sound like a royal decree. Antonio smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Let's say I work in import and export. Family business. Been operating in Chicago for 3 generations. We specialize in solving problems that other people can't or won't address. The carefully vague answer told me everything I needed to know. Import and export was classic organized crime euphemism, the kind of description that sounded legitimate while meaning something entirely different. Antonio Marchetti wasn't just wealthy or connected, he was part of Chicago's underworld, the kind of man my criminology professors had lectured about in careful, academic terms that never quite captured the reality of sitting across from one in a candlelit room. So you're a criminal. I should probably have been more diplomatic, but wine and fear had eroded my filter. That's why Tony was so nervous. That's why everyone in the restaurant treats you like royalty or explosives. Those are strong words. His expression hadn't changed, but something in the air between us had shifted. I prefer to think of myself as a businessman operating in markets that conventional society has deemed illegal. The demand exists regardless of legality, Emma. I simply meet that demand while maintaining certain standards that others in my industry ignore. Standards like not hurting women. Standards like understanding that power without restraint is just chaos. Standards like recognizing when someone needs help and having the resources to provide it. He leaned forward slightly, candlelight casting shadows across his sharp features. Tell me about the man who put his hands on your throat. The direct question made my chest tighten with panic. I can't or won't. Both. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You don't understand. If I talk about Marcus, if I try to leave or press charges or tell anyone what happened, he'll kill me. He's told me exactly that. He's a police officer, Antonio. He has friends in the department, connections in the legal system. Who's gonna believe a graduate school dropout waitress over a decorated cop? The silence that followed my confession was profound. I watched Antonio process the information, saw his expression shift from concern to something far colder and more dangerous. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quality that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. His full name, Marcus Dawson. The words felt like betrayal even as I spoke them. He's a detective in the organized crime division. We've been dating for 8 months, though dating is probably too generous a term for what our relationship became. When did it start? The violence. 3 months ago. I took another sip of wine, needing the liquid courage to continue. Small things at first. He'd grab my arm too hard when he was angry, push me during arguments. I told myself it wasn't really abuse, that he was just stressed from work. But it escalated. 2 weeks ago, he punched me for the first time. Left a bruise on my ribs that still heal. 3 days ago, when I said I wanted to take a break from the relationship, he choked me until I passed out. Did he rape you? The blunt question should have offended me, but there was no prurience in Antonio's tone, just clinical assessment of facts he needed to understand the full scope of the situation. No. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm room, but I think that's coming. The way he looks at me now, it's different, like he wants to completely break me to prove he owns me in every possible way. Antonio stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the street below. For several long moments, he simply stared out at the Chicago night, his back rigid with controlled tension. When he finally turned to face me again, his expression had transformed into something that should have terrified me, but somehow didn't. Here's what's going to happen, Emma. You're not going home tonight. You're going to stay in a safe location that Marcus Dawson has no knowledge of and no access to. Tomorrow, my people will retrieve your belongings from your apartment. Within a week, Detective Dawson will no longer be a threat to you or any other woman. The casual way he outlined what sounded distinctly like a murder plot made my head spin. You can't just kill a police detective. The department would investigate. They'd tear apart the city looking for whoever did it. Who said anything about killing? Antonio's smile was sharp as broken glass. There are many ways to neutralize a threat, Emma. Death is just the most permanent option, and often not the most effective. Detective Dawson has built his life on violence and intimidation. I simply need to show him what it feels like to be on the receiving end. I should have been horrified. Every moral principle I'd been raised with, every law I'd studied in my abbreviated graduate program, should have been screaming at me to refuse his help. But all I could think about was Marcus's hands around my throat, the way my vision had tunneled to black while he whispered about what he'd do if I ever tried to leave. Why? The question emerged barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. Because I recognized the look in your eyes. Antonio moved back to the table, settling into his chair with controlled grace. I've seen that same expression on my mother's face in photographs from when she was married to my father's associate, the man who eventually killed her when I was 15 because she finally found the courage to try to leave. The raw honesty in his confession stole my breath. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me an important lesson about the kind of man I never wanted to become. He reached across the table, his hand palmed up an invitation rather than demand. My father eliminated the bastard who killed her, but it was too late to save her. I've spent the past 15 years ensuring that other women don't suffer the same fate when I have the power to prevent it. I stared at his outstretched hand, understanding that accepting it meant crossing a line I could never uncross. Antonio Marchetti was offering protection, yes, but also entanglement in a world I'd only studied from safe academic distance. A world where problems were solved with violence, where justice was administered outside courtrooms and legal frameworks. But what was the alternative? Going home to Marcus? Hoping the police department would protect me from one of their own? Waiting for the night when choking escalated to something worse? Slowly, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine with surprising gentleness, the warmth of his touch chasing away some of the cold fear that had lived in my chest for months. There are conditions. His voice had gone very quiet, very serious. You do exactly as I say regarding your safety. You don't contact Marcus for any reason, and you trust that I know how to handle men like him. I don't have much choice, do I? There's always a choice, Emma, but some choices are significantly safer than others. He stood, helping me to my feet with old-world courtesy. Now we're gonna walk out of here together. My car's waiting in the private lot behind the restaurant. You're gonna smile and look like a woman enjoying an evening out rather than fleeing for her life. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Antonio's hand found the small of my back, guiding me toward the door with the proprietary touch of someone escorting a date rather than rescuing an abuse victim. The distinction felt important somehow, like he was offering me dignity alongside protection. The hallway outside the private dining room was empty, most of the staff already gone for the night. Tony was at the bar doing final counts, and he glanced up as we passed. His expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight nod he gave. Permission granted or acknowledgement received, I wasn't sure which. The night air hit me like a physical force when we stepped outside, cool October wind cutting through my thin waitress uniform. Antonio immediately shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it around my shoulders, the silk lining still warm from his body heat. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that tears finally escaped my careful control, tracking hot paths down my cheeks. I'm sorry. I wiped at my face with shaking hands, mortified by the breakdown. I don't usually fall apart like this. You've been holding yourself together for months while being terrorized by someone who should have protected you. Antonio guided me toward a black Mercedes with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that screamed money and power. You're allowed to fall apart now that you're safe. Am I safe? The question hung between us as he opened the passenger door. Or have I just traded one dangerous situation for another? His hand cupped my face with surprising gentleness, thumb brushing away tears with the careful touch of someone handling something precious and fragile. The difference is that I'll never hurt you, Emma, and anyone who tries will answer to me. I wanted to believe, God, how desperately I wanted to believe that safety was possible, that the nightmare of the past 3 months could actually end. So I let him help me into the car, let him close the door with protective care, and watched as he moved around to the driver's side with the confident stride of a man who controlled his world absolutely. As we pulled away from Rossi's, I caught one last glimpse of my reflection in the side mirror. I looked young and frightened, wrapped in an expensive jacket that belonged to a dangerous man, being driven to an unknown location by someone I'd met only hours earlier. Every rational thought in my head screamed that this was madness, but for the first time in 3 days, my hands had finally stopped shaking. The safe house turned out to be a penthouse apartment in one of Chicago's most exclusive buildings, the kind of address that appeared in luxury real estate magazines with price tags listed as. Upon request, Antonio guided me through a lobby that looked more like a 5-star hotel, complete with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a doorman who nodded respectfully as we passed without asking questions or requiring identification. The private elevator required a key card to access the top floor, and I watched the numbers climb with mounting anxiety. 32 floors up, I'd be completely isolated from the world I knew, dependent entirely on Antonio's protection and goodwill. The rational part of my brain that had earned me a spot in one of the country's top criminology programs kept screaming warnings about how this was exactly the kind of isolation that abusers engineered. Control through dependence, protection as prison. But Antonio wasn't Marcus. The difference became clear the moment we stepped into the penthouse, and he immediately moved to give me space rather than claiming it for himself. The guest room is down that hallway, second door on the left. His voice was professionally neutral, like a concierge explaining hotel amenities. You'll find clothes in the closet that should fit. Bathroom is stocked with everything you might need. If you require anything else, there's a house phone on the nightstand that connects directly to my assistant, Sophia. She'll be checking on you in the morning. Your assistant knows about me? The question came out sharper than I'd intended, paranoia making me see threats in every shadow. Sophia knows that I've offered protection to someone in need. She doesn't need to know specifics, and she won't ask. Discretion is one of the many reasons I employ her. Antonio moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of Chicago's glittering skyline. The apartment has a comprehensive security system, armed guards in the lobby, cameras on every floor, and nobody reaches this level without my explicit permission. So I'm a prisoner. The words tasted bitter. You're protected. There's a difference. He turned to face me, and in the soft lighting of the penthouse, he looked younger somehow. Less like a crime boss and more like a man carrying weight he'd never asked for. You can leave anytime you want, Emma. I won't stop you. But I would strongly advise against going anywhere that Marcus Dawson knows about until I've handled the situation. And how exactly are you planning to handle a police detective who has an entire department backing him up? Antonio's smile was sharp and dangerous. Detective Dawson Dawson believes he's untouchable because of his badge and connections. Tomorrow morning, he's going to discover just how wrong he is. Now you should get some rest. You look exhausted. He was right. I was exhausted, bone deep, tired in a way that went far beyond physical fatigue. 3 months of hypervigilance, of constantly monitoring Marcus's moods and adjusting my behavior to avoid triggering his rage, had left me running on empty. But the thought of sleeping in a stranger's apartment while my entire life was being dismantled and rebuilt without my input made anxiety spike through my chest. I can't just do nothing. The protest emerged weaker than I'd intended. This is my life. My problem. I should be involved in whatever you're planning. You are involved. Antonio moved closer but stopped at a careful distance that gave me space to breathe. You told me the truth about what happened. You accepted help when you needed it. That took more courage than you realize. Now let me do what I do best, just solving problems that conventional methods can't address. By conventional methods, you mean legal ones. I mean ineffective ones. How many times have women filed restraining orders against abusive partners only to end up dead when the paper didn't stop bullets? How many cops have gotten away with domestic violence because their brothers in blue covered for them? He shook his head, frustration evident in the sharp gesture. The system you want to trust failed you the moment Marcus Dawson was given a badge and a gun. Despite whatever warning signs existed in his background, the brutal honesty of his assessment hit harder because I couldn't argue with it. My criminology studies had covered the statistics on police domestic violence, the way departments protected their own even when evidence of abuse was overwhelming. Marcus had told me about other cops he knew who hit their wives, bragged about how internal affairs investigations always mysteriously went nowhere. What are you going to do to him? I needed to know, needed to understand what accepting Antonio's help would mean in concrete terms. Tomorrow morning, Detective Dawson will receive photographs showing him choking, time-stamped, location-stamped, taken by security cameras I had installed in your apartment building 3 years ago when the landlord failed to address multiple break-ins. He paused, letting that information sink in. Along with the photographs will be a comprehensive dossier detailing every departmental regulation he's violated, every case he's mishandled, every corner he's cut. Information that his superiors can't ignore without implicating themselves in covering up police misconduct. You've had cameras in my building for 3 years? The revelation should have disturbed me more than it did. How did you even know where I lived? I own the building, Emma. I own 17 residential properties throughout Chicago, most in neighborhoods where landlords typically exploit tenants and ignore safety concerns. I acquired your building because the previous owner was running it into the ground while charging outrageous rent. The cameras were installed to prevent crime, not to spy on tenants. The casual mention of owning 17 buildings reinforced just how different Antonio's world was from mine. I struggled to make rent on a studio apartment while he collected properties like other people collected stamps. So Marcus will see the photographs and what? Suddenly develop a conscience? The skepticism in my voice was earned. Men like him don't respond to evidence or consequences. They respond to power and violence. This is why the photographs are just the first step. Antonio's expression had gone cold, calculating in a way that reminded me this man hadn't built his empire through kindness. Detective Dawson will also receive a visit from representatives of the Marchetti family. They'll explain in very clear terms that you are under our protection, and any further contact with you will be considered a declaration of war against my organization. And if he ignores the warning, then he'll discover that police badges don't stop bullets any better than restraining orders do. The flat delivery of what was essentially a death threat should have horrified. Instead, I felt a dark satisfaction that someone finally understood the level of danger Marcus represented. I should feel guilty about this. My voice had gone quiet, contemplative. I should be trying to talk you out of threatening violence against another human being. But all I can think about is that maybe I'll finally be able to sleep through the night without listening for his key in my door. Guilt is what society uses to keep victims compliant and abusers protected. Antonio closed the distance between us slowly, giving me time to step back if I wanted. His hand rose to gently touch the scarf still wrapped around my neck. May I? I nodded, not trusting my voice. His fingers worked the silk loose with surprising delicacy, unwrapping the fabric that had concealed Marcus's handiwork. Cool air hit my bruised throat, and I watched Antonio's expression darken as he saw the full extent of the damage. He nearly killed you. It wasn't a question. Another few seconds of pressure and you would have lost consciousness permanently. I know. The admission hurt almost as much as the bruises. I felt myself dying, felt everything going dark, and thought, this is it. This is how my story ends. On the floor of my apartment, while the man who claimed to love me squeezed the life out of me. That's not how your story ends. Antonio's voice carried absolute conviction. Your story is just beginning, Emma, and Detective Marcus Dawson is about to learn that there are consequences for putting his hands on someone under Marchetti protection. I'm not under Marchetti protection. We just met a few hours ago. This is insane. Is it? He studied my face with that intense focus I was beginning to recognize. You saw something in me tonight, Emma, the same thing I saw in you. Recognition, understanding. We're both people people who've been touched by violence in ways that changed us fundamentally. The difference is that I have the power to ensure your story has a different ending than my mother's. The mention of his mother, the woman who died trying to escape an abusive marriage, created an intimacy between us that felt more significant than physical touch. This wasn't just about protecting me. This was Antonio trying to save someone he couldn't save 15 years ago, trying to write a different ending to a story that had shaped his entire life. I should rest. The words came out as surrender, acceptance of circumstances I couldn't control and possibly didn't want. Thank you, Antonio, for the dinner, for the protection, for believing me when you had no reason to. I have every reason to believe you. His hand dropped from my throat, though his gaze lingered on the bruises with barely controlled fury. Those marks tell a story that words never could. Now go sleep. Tomorrow we begin rebuilding your life. I walked toward the guest room on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Exhaustion and emotional overload finally catching up with me. At the doorway, I turned back to find Antonio still standing where I'd left him, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline like a dark guardian watching over territory he'd claimed as his own. Antonio? He looked up, those storm gray eyes finding mine across the expensive space that separated us. Why do I feel safer with you than I ever did with Marcus, even in the beginning when he was pretending to be a good man? Because Marcus's goodness was always a performance designed to trap you. His smile was sad and knowing. I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. And what I am is someone who understands that real protection means giving you the power to rebuild your life, not controlling every aspect of it. The guest room was larger than my entire studio apartment, decorated in soothing blues and grays that should have been calming. But as I sank onto the bed, still wearing my waitress uniform and Antonio's suit jacket, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil. A handsome, compelling devil who spoke about violence with the same casual ease other men discussed weather forecasts. My phone buzzed in my pocket and my blood turned to ice when I saw Marcus's name on the screen. 15 missed calls, 37 text messages, all sent in the 3 hours since my shift had ended. I scrolled through them with shaking hands, watching the messages evolve from concern to anger to barely contained rage. Where are you? So the first one had been almost reasonable. I came by Rosie's to pick you up, but you'd already left. Then, Emma, answer your fucking phone right now. Followed by, I know you're seeing someone else. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? And finally, you made a mistake leaving me, baby. You're going to regret this. Nobody leaves Marcus Dawson. Nobody. I should have been terrified. The threats were explicit, the possessive rage evident in every word, but all I felt was exhausted relief that I wouldn't have to face him alone, that somewhere in this penthouse a dangerous man was already planning how to neutralize the threat Marcus represented. My phone buzzed again, another message appearing. This time it was a photo. Marcus standing outside my apartment building, his face twisted with fury as he stared up at windows he couldn't reach. The caption read, I'll wait all night if I have to. You have to come home eventually. But I wouldn't be coming home. Not tonight, possibly not ever. That chapter of my life had ended the moment Antonio Marchetti noticed the bruises on my neck and offered protection that came with strings I was only beginning to understand. I forwarded the photo to Antonio's number, which he'd programmed into my phone during the car ride. Then I turned off the device completely and buried myself under expensive bedding that smelled like lavender and safety. For the first time in 3 months, I slept through the night without nightmares. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a precious few seconds I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back with the weight of everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. I was in Antonio Marchetti's penthouse hiding from my abusive ex-boyfriend, dependent on a crime boss for protection I couldn't provide myself. The guest room looked different in daylight, less like a temporary refuge and more like a carefully curated space designed for comfort and security. Original artwork adorned the walls, pieces I vaguely recognized from my art history electives. The closet that Antonio had mentioned was actually a walk-in larger than my bathroom, filled with women's clothing in various sizes. All designer labels with price tags that made my eyes water. Someone knocked softly on the door and I scrambled to make myself presentable, running fingers through hair that probably looked like I'd been electrocuted. Come in. The woman who entered moved with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to navigating powerful men's spaces without disturbing the careful balance of authority. She was mid-30s, elegantly dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of wealth without flaunting it, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun and intelligent eyes that assessed me with professional thoroughness. Good morning, Miss Carson. I'm Sophia Romano, Mr. Marchetti's personal assistant. She carried a silver tray laden with coffee, fresh fruit, and pastries that smelled like they'd been baked within the hour. I hope you slept well, better than I have in months. The admission felt like vulnerability, exposing just how desperate my situation had been. Thank you for the clothes. I gestured toward the walk-in closet. Though I'm curious how you knew my size. Mr. Marchetti is very thorough in his preparations. Sophia set the tray on a small table near the windows, her movements practiced and precise. He had me stock this apartment with various sizes after acquiring the property 6 months ago. He occasionally provides temporary housing for people who need protection from difficult circumstances. So I'm not the first charity case he's rescued. The bitterness in my voice surprised me. You're not charity, Miss Carson. Sophia's expression remained professionally professionally neutral, but something in her tone suggested personal experience with whatever. She was about to say, Mr. Marchetti doesn't do anything without purpose. If he's offered you protection, it's because he sees something in you worth protecting beyond simple altruism. And what does he see? I wrap my arms around myself, suddenly feeling exposed despite being fully clothed. A broken woman running from violence? Someone he can control and manipulate? I've worked for Antonio Marchetti for 7 years, and in that time, I've watched him make countless decisions about who deserves his protection and resources. Sophia poured coffee into delicate china cups, the rich aroma filling the room. He has many faults, but preying on vulnerable women isn't among them. If anything, he goes out of his way to ensure the people under his protection maintain their autonomy and dignity. The defense was interesting, coming from someone who clearly understood the darker aspects of Antonio's business. How did you end up working for him? Similar circumstances to yours, actually. She handed me a cup, and I noticed the slight tremor in her hands before she controlled it. My ex-husband was a prosecutor with connections throughout the justice system. When I tried to leave, he used those connections to make my life impossible. Restraining orders were ignored, police reports disappeared, and I was accused of being an unstable woman trying to destroy a good man's reputation. What happened? I made the mistake of going to a support group for domestic violence survivors. One of the other women was connected to the Marchetti family. Within a week, my ex-husband had been transferred to a district attorney's office in Alaska, his reputation thoroughly destroyed by evidence of misconduct that mysteriously appeared in the hands of reporters and his superiors. I was offered a job, a fresh start, and the kind of protection that actually meant something. The parallel to my own situation was unmistakable. And now you work for the man who saved you. Now I work for the man who gave me back my life when the system designed to protect me failed completely. Sophia's expression had gone intense, passionate in a way that revealed the woman beneath the professional facade. Say what you want about Antonio Marchetti's methods, Miss Carson, but he's saved more women from violent men than the entire Chicago Police Department combined. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the nightstand where I'd left it after turning it back on to check for messages. The screen showed 3 new voicemails from Marcus, sent at 2-hour intervals throughout the night. Sophia noticed my reaction, her gaze sharpening with concern. Is that him? Your ex? I nodded, unable to find words. The thought of listening to those voicemails, of hearing Marcus's voice alternating between rage and false tenderness, made my stomach churn with anxiety. Don't listen to them. Sophia's voice carried absolute certainty. Miss Marchetti has already handled the situation. Detective Dawson received his morning wake-up call about an hour ago. By now, he should be sitting in his precinct captain's office, trying to explain photographic evidence of assault and a list of departmental violations that would take months to investigate properly. How do you know all this? Because coordinating M.R. Marchetti's operations is literally my job. She smiled slightly, the first crack in her professional demeanor. I was the one who compiled the evidence packet, coordinated the delivery timing, and ensured that key members of the Internal Affairs Division received copies simultaneously with Detective Dawson's superior. By the time he realizes the scope of what's happening, his career will already be over. The casual efficiency with which she described destroying a man's life should have disturbed. Instead, I felt a fierce satisfaction that Marcus was finally facing consequences for his actions. That satisfaction came with a sharp edge of fear. Men like Marcus didn't accept defeat gracefully. They lashed out, found new ways to hurt the women who'd escaped their control. He won't just accept this. My voice emerged barely above a whisper. He'll come after me harder now. He'll want revenge for destroying his career, which is why you're here, protected by security that Detective Dawson can't penetrate. Sophia's certainty was absolute, and why Marchetti is assigned a protective detail that will remain with you until the threat is permanently neutralized. Another euphemism from a world where violence was business as usual. Does that mean what I think it means? It means whatever Marchetti decides is necessary to ensure your safety. Sometimes that's simply making the cost of pursuit higher than the satisfaction of revenge. Sometimes it requires more permanent solution. She paused, studying my face with the same intense assessment I'd seen in Antonio. How much do you know about the Marchetti family organization? Only what I studied in my criminology courses. Traditional Italian crime family, operating in Chicago since the 1920s. Involvement in gambling, labor unions, construction, and various legitimate business ventures that provide cover for less legal activity. The academic description felt inadequate now that I was living inside the reality of it. That's the skeleton, but it misses the important detail. Sophia settled into a chair across from me, clearly preparing to deliver information she deemed essential. The Marchetti family operates by a code that's been maintained for 3 generations. They don't traffic in drugs, don't exploit women through prostitution, and don't involve civilians in their conflicts with rival organizations. Those rules have kept them powerful while other families destroyed themselves through excess and cruelty, so they're criminals with ethics. The sarcasm felt necessary, a defense against the way I was being drawn into accepting this world as normal. They're pragmatists who understand that long-term power requires more than just fear and violence. Sophia's expression had gone serious. Antonio's grandfather built this organization by protecting the neighborhoods that the police ignored. His father expanded it by ensuring that Marchetti businesses provided fair wages and safe working conditions when other employers exploited immigrant labor. And Antonio has continued that tradition while modernizing operations to compete in 21st century markets. You sound like you're describing a legitimate corporation rather than a crime family, because that's increasingly what it is. Most of the Marchetti income comes from legitimate sources now: restaurants, construction companies, security consulting firms, real estate holdings. The criminal enterprise exists primarily to protect those legitimate interests and to handle problems that conventional business methods can't address. Problems like abusive cops who terrorize their girlfriend. Exactly. She stood, smoothing her already immaculate suit. Marchetti asked me to tell you that he's arranged for your belongings to be retrieved from your apartment this afternoon. A team will pack everything and move it to a new location that Detective Dawson has no knowledge of. A new location? I'm getting a new apartment? You're getting a new life, Miss Carson. New apartment, new identification if necessary, new employment opportunities that don't require you to risk running into your ex or his police friends. She paused at the door. Marchetti also asked if you'd join him for lunch around 1 o'clock. He has some things he'd like to discuss about your situation and potential future arrangements. The phrase suggested permanence, ongoing involvement with Antonio and his organization that went beyond temporary protection. I'm not sure I'm ready for that conversation. No one ever is, but avoiding it won't make your circumstances any less real. Sophia's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, Miss Carson, you made the right choice accepting his help. I've seen what happens to women who try to handle situations like yours alone. It rarely ends well. After she left, I forced myself to eat breakfast despite my churning stomach, shower in a bathroom that looked like a luxury spa, and dress in clothes that fit perfectly despite never having been chosen by me. The efficiency of Antonio's preparations was both comforting and unsettling. How long had he been planning for this? How many other women had passed through this apartment wearing these clothes? Eating breakfast while their lives were systematically rebuilt by a man who operated outside every system designed to help people like us? At exactly 1 o'clock, Sophia returned to escort me to Antonio's office. The penthouse was larger than I'd realized, with multiple wings extending from the central living space. Antonio's private office was at the far end, a room that managed to feel both luxurious and functional. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, filled with what looked like first editions and academic texts on subjects ranging from military strategy to behavioral psychology. His desk was mahogany, probably an antique, positioned to face the door with his back to bulletproof windows that offered unobstructed views of the city. He stood when I entered, moving around the desk with that fluid grace I was beginning to recognize as the result of extensive physical training. Today he wore dark jeans and a black sweater, looking younger and somehow more dangerous in casual clothes. Emma. The way he said my name made it sound like something precious. How are you feeling this morning? Confused, grateful, terrified. I tried for honesty, figuring lies would be pointless with someone who read people the way Antonio did. Like my life has been completely turned upside down in less than 24 hours. That's accurate. He gestured toward a small seating area near the windows, 2 leather chairs positioned for conversation rather than confrontation. Sophia briefed you on the morning's activities? She told me you destroyed Marcus's career before he'd finished his first cup of coffee. I settled into one of the chairs, hyper-aware of Antonio's proximity as he took the seat across from me. She also mentioned something about permanent solutions if necessary. Detective Dawson is currently suspended pending investigation. The evidence we provided to Internal Affairs is comprehensive enough that even his connections won't save him from significant consequences. But suspension isn't permanent removal of threat. Antonio's expression had gone cold, calculating, which is why I wanted to discuss your preferences regarding how we proceed from here. My preferences. The phrase hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. You're asking me how far I want you to go in dealing with Marcus? I'm asking you to understand the options available and their consequence. Antonio leaned forward slightly, his storm gray eyes holding mine with uncomfortable intensity. Option 1 is what we've already implemented: professional destruction, legal pressure, and implicit threats that make pursuing you more costly than simply moving on with his life. This works for most men. Their self-preservation instinct outweighs their need for revenge. But not for all men. Not for all men. His agreement was quiet. Matter of fact, men like Detective Dawson, who build their identity around control and dominance, sometimes become more dangerous when that control is challenged. The suspension could make him desperate rather than cautious. Desperate men make irrational choices. I wrap my arms around myself, feeling cold despite the warm room. And option 2? Option 2 involves ensuring Detective Dawson can never threaten you or any other woman again. Permanent removal from the equation through methods that the legal system can't or won't employ. Antonio's voice carried no emotion, just clinical assessment of available strategies. I have the resources and expertise to make this happen in a way that avoids consequences for you or my organization. You're talking about murder. The word felt heavy on my tongue, final in a way that all the euphemisms and carefully vague language hadn't been. You're asking me to authorize killing Marcus. I'm asking you to understand that protecting you might require difficult difficult decisions. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had shifted. This isn't about revenge or punishment, Emma. This is about ensuring your safety in a world where restraining orders are. Suggestions and police badges are shields that protect abusers from accountability. The brutal honesty of his assessment cut through my moral objections like a knife because he was right. Everything I'd studied in criminology confirmed that the system failed domestic violence victims with depressing regularity. Women obtained restraining orders and were killed anyway. Cops investigated their colleagues' abuse allegations and found nothing wrong. And men like Marcus continued terrorizing partners because they'd learned that consequences were optional for people with the right connections. I can't be the person who orders someone's death. My voice cracked on the words, revealing how close to breaking I actually was. Even if Marcus deserves it, even if the world would be safer without him, I can't carry that weight. You wouldn't be ordering anything. Antonio's hand reached out, stopping just short of touching mine in a gesture that felt like an offered anchor. Any action I take regarding Detective Dawson is my decision, based on my assessment of threat level and my commitment to protecting people under Marchetti care. Your conscience remains clear, but I'd still know. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I'd know that Marcus died because I accepted your help. That's a different kind of prison, Antonio. Trading physical danger for moral compromise. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through carefully constructed defenses. Then he stood, moving to the windows that overlooked Chicago's sprawling landscape. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an unexpected vulnerability. My mother used to say the same thing, that she couldn't be responsible for violence against the man who hurt her, even after he'd put her in the hospital 3 separate times. She believed in redemption and the possibility that people could change if given enough chances. He paused, hands clasped behind his back. She was wrong, and her faith in his potential for change is what killed her. The raw pain in his confession made my chest ache with sympathy. I'm sorry that happened to her, to you, but I'm not your mother, Anton. And this isn't that situation, isn't it? He turned to face me, and for the first time since we'd met, I saw past the controlled facade to the 15-year-old boy who'd lost his mother to violence he couldn't prevent. You're a woman being terrorized by a man who's demonstrated his willingness to kill you. He's already choked you until you lost consciousness. The next time, he'll finish what he started. And you're asking me to show restraint because your moral code won't allow you to authorize the only solution that guarantees your safety. The accusation stung because it was accurate. I was asking Antonio to operate within ethical boundaries I'd never had to maintain myself, to show mercy to a man who'd shown me none. But accepting that Marcus needed to die, that violence was the only answer to violence, felt like losing some essential part of who I was. There has to be another option. The plea emerged, desperate, grasping, something between destroying his career and ending his life. Antonio returned to his chair, settling into it with controlled grace. There is. Option 3 involves making Detective Dawson understand that pursuing you means war with an organization that has resources he can't match and connections he can't overcome. We demonstrate our reach, our willingness to hurt everything he cares about, until the cost of revenge becomes unthinkable. How would that work? Over the next few weeks, Detective Dawson would experience systematic dismantling of his comfortable life. His bank accounts would be frozen due to suspicious activity investigations. His apartment would be burglarized repeatedly, each time taking items that can't be replaced. His new girlfriend, if he has one, would receive anonymous information about his history of abuse. His family members would face professional complications that seem coincidental but follow a clear pattern. That sounds like torture. It is torture. Antonio's expression remained neutral. Clinical, psychological warfare designed to break his sense of security without requiring his death. Eventually, most men reach a point where they're willing to accept any terms that make the pain stop. We'd offer him a choice: leave Chicago permanently and never contact you again, or continue suffering consequences that will only escalate. And if he refuses, if he's too proud or too stubborn or too damaged to accept those terms, then we revisit option 2. But at least you'll know we tried every alternative first. His voice had gone soft, almost gentle. I'm not asking you to make this decision right now, Emma. I'm just ensuring you understand the reality of your situation and the tools available to address it. I stood abruptly, needing to move, to process information that felt like too much weight for my shoulders to carry. This isn't who I am. I don't make decisions about whether people live or die. I'm just a graduate school dropout who serves pasta to rich people. You're a woman with a degree in criminal psychology who recognized behavioral patterns that saved my life. Antonio stood as well, moving closer but maintaining careful distance. You're someone who survived 3 months of escalating abuse and found the courage to accept help when it was offered. And you're under my protection now, which means the decisions about how to neutralize threats are ultimately mine to make. I'm just giving you the courtesy of understanding the option. The courtesy of understanding. As if knowing the menu of violence available for my benefit somehow made me less complicit in whatever Antonio decided to do. But he was right about one thing. The decisions were his to make. I'd surrendered that autonomy the moment I accepted his protection. The moment I'd climbed into his car and let him drive me away from everything familiar. I need time to think. The words felt inadequate, but they were all I had. This is too much to process in a single conversation. Take all the time you need. In the meantime, your belongings are being moved to a new apartment I've arranged. Sophia will show you the location this afternoon, and you can decide if it suits your needs. If not, we'll find something else. Another decision made on my behalf, my life being reorganized according to Antonio's plans and specifications. I should have been angry about the presumption. Instead, I felt exhausted relief that someone else was handling logistics I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to manage. Antonio, he looked up, those storm gray eyes finding mine across the space that separated us. Why are you doing all this? The protection, the new apartment, the systematic destruction of Marcus's life. What do you get out of it? Peace. The answer was so quiet I almost missed it. I get peace knowing that I didn't let another woman die when I had the power to prevent it. I get to look in the mirror and see someone who learned from his mother's death rather than simply being damaged by it. And maybe, if I'm being completely honest, I get the hope that someone as intelligent and perceptive as you might see past the violence of my world to the person underneath. The vulnerability in his confession stole my breath. This wasn't just about protecting me or honoring his mother's memory. This was about Antonio wanting to be seen as something other than a criminal, a killer, a man whose hands were stained with blood from maintaining his family's empire. I already see that person. The admission surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise him. From the moment you noticed the bruises on my neck, when you could have simply pretended not to see them and enjoyed your expensive dinner in peace, you chose to get involved in someone else's pain when you had every reason not to. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the edges that made him look younger and more vulnerable. That's the first time anyone's described my intervention as a choice rather than an obligation or calculated move. Maybe you've been surrounding yourself with the wrong people. I attempted a smile, though it probably looked as shaky as I felt. Or maybe you've spent so long being the head of a crime family that you've forgotten you're also just a man who cares about preventing suffering. Just a man. He moved closer. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the expensive cologne that had been clinging to his jacket the night before. I haven't been just a man in 15 years, Emma, but when you look at me like that, I almost remember what it felt like. The moments stretched between us, heavy with possibility and danger in equal measure. This was the edge I'd been avoiding since accepting his help. The recognition that Antonio Marchetti wasn't just my protector or benefactor. He was a man who looked at me with hunger that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with connection I wasn't sure either of us was ready for. Sophia's knock on the door broke the tension. Her impeccable timing suggesting she'd been monitoring the situation and chosen this exact moment to interrupt. Mr. Marchetti, the moving team has arrived at Miss Carson's apartment. They're requesting authorization to proceed. Granted. Antonio's voice had shifted back to business mode, the vulnerable moment vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. And, Sophia, please show Emma the new apartment when you have time. I want her approval before we finalize the lease. Of course, sir. Sophia's expression remained professionally neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she'd noticed the charged atmosphere in the room. Miss Carson, whenever you're ready. I followed Sophia out of Antonio's office, my mind spinning with too many thoughts to process clearly. Behind me, I felt Antonio's gaze tracking my movement, a physical weight that promised both protection and complications I wasn't prepared to navigate. The new apartment was in Lincoln Park, a neighborhood I'd always admired from a distance but never imagined I could afford. Sophia drove us there in a sleek black sedan, navigating Chicago's afternoon traffic with the calm efficiency she seemed to apply to everything. The building was boutique, maybe 20 units total, with the kind of understated elegance that screamed expensive without being ostentatious. This property has been in the Marchetti portfolio for 8 years. Sophia explained as we rode the elevator to the 4th floor. All tenants are carefully vetted and building security is managed by our people. You'll be safe here. Safe because Antonio owns it. The realization should have bothered me more than it did. I'm trading one form of dependence for another. Independence is an illusion we tell ourselves to feel better about the fact that we all depend on someone. Sophia's voice carried the weight of hard-won experience. The question isn't whether you depend on others, but whether the people you depend on have your best interests at heart. The apartment took my breath away. Hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. The furniture was minimal but high quality, chosen with an eye toward comfort rather than showmanship. One bedroom, one bathroom, a kitchen that actually had counter space and appliances that looked like they functioned. Compared to the studio I'd been living in, this felt like a palace. It's too much. I turned to Sophia, overwhelmed by the generosity and uncomfortable with the debt I was accumulating. I can't afford this. Not on a waitress salary. The rent is $800 a month, utilities included. Sophia handed me a manila folder containing lease documents. That's actually below market rate for this neighborhood. M.R. Marchetti believes in fair housing practices, even in his own properties. $800 a month for a Lincoln Park apartment that would typically rent for 3 times that amount. The subsidy was generous and humiliating in equal measure. A reminder that my comfortable new life was built on Antonio's charity and criminal empire profits. And if I want to refuse, if I want to find my own place that I can actually afford, then M.R. Marchetti will help you find something that meets your safety requirements and budget. Sophia's expression remained neutral, but something in her tone suggested she'd had similar conversations before. But Emma, may I be frank with you? I nodded, bracing for whatever uncomfortable truth she was about to deliver. You have approximately $300 in your checking account. Your credit cards are maxed out from your mother's medical expenses. Your previous apartment cost $700 a month for 400 square feet in a neighborhood where gunshots are regular background noise. She gestured toward the windows overlooking tree-lined streets and historic brownstone. This apartment represents an upgrade in every measurable way, including safety. Pride is admirable, but it's a luxury you can't currently afford. The brutal assessment of my financial situation stung because it was accurate. I'd been living paycheck to paycheck for years, drowning in medical debt from my mother's cancer treatments, barely scraping by in an apartment I could hardly afford. Antonio's offer wasn't charity. It was a life raft thrown to someone already underwater. I'll take it. The words came out as surrender, acceptance of circumstances I couldn't change and possibly didn't want to. When can I move in? Your belongings are being delivered within the hour. Sophia checked her phone with practiced efficiency. I've arranged for groceries to be stocked in the kitchen, toiletries in the bathroom, and linens for the bed. If you need anything else, there's a house account at the market down the street. Just mention you're with the Marchetti organization. Of course there was. Antonio had thought of everything, anticipated every need, removed every obstacle that might prevent me from settling into my new life. The thoroughness should have been comforting. Instead, it reinforced how completely dependent I'd become on his resources and protection. Sophia, she looked up from her phone, giving me her full attention. How many women have you had this conversation with? How many people has Antonio rescued and set up in apartments like this? You're the third in the 7 years I've worked for him. Her honesty was refreshing after so much careful political maneuvering. The first was me. The second was a teenager whose father was trafficking her to pay gambling debts. Marchetti eliminated the father, placed the girl with a family in Seattle, and ensured she had resources to finish high school and attend college. What happened to the father? He disappeared. The flat delivery of what was clearly a murder confession should have horrified, which was probably the best outcome for everyone involved, including the other 3 daughters he would have eventually sold to the same men. I moved to the windows, looking down at the street below where normal people live normal lives, going to work, raising families, dealing with ordinary problems that didn't involve crime bosses and systematic dismantling of abusive cops' lives. How did you reconcile it? Working for someone who solves problems through violence. I stopped pretending that violence was something only bad people engaged in. Sophia joined me at the window, her reflection in the glass showing a woman who'd made peace with complicated choices. The system we're taught to trust, police and courts and legal protections, failed me completely when I needed help. Antonio Marchetti succeeded where the system failed. That's all the reconciliation I need. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen and I watched her expression shift from professional calm to sharp concern. We need to return to the penthouse. Marchetti wants you in secure location immediately. What happened? It's flooded my veins, fear making my voice sharp. Is it Marcus? Detective Dawson attempted to access Marchetti's building 20 minutes ago. Sophia was already moving toward the door, her hand on what I now realize was a concealed weapon beneath her suit jacket. He was denied entry, but his presence there suggests he's connected you to Marchetti faster than we anticipated. The drive back to Antonio's penthouse felt like the longest 30 minutes of my life. Sophia drove with aggressive confidence, running yellow lights and making turns that had me gripping the door handle. She spoke rapidly into a Bluetooth earpiece, coordinating with security personnel in language that mixed Italian and English in ways that suggested protocols, developed over decades of practice. The penthouse was transformed when we arrived. Men in dark suits occupied every strategic position, their presence converting elegant living space into fortress. Antonio stood at the windows overlooking the street, his posture rigid with controlled tension. He turned when we entered, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. How did he find me? My voice came out smaller than I'd intended. I was careful. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. You didn't need to. Antonio's voice was cold, professional. The vulnerable man from earlier completely submerged beneath the crime boss persona. Detective Dawson had access to police surveillance networks and informants throughout the city. He followed the trail from Razi's to my known properties and made an educated guess. So coming to you made me easier to find, not harder. The irony was bitter. I led him straight to your door. No. You survived long enough for me to provide real protection. Antonio moved closer, his hand finding my shoulder with surprising gentleness. Dawson showing up here is actually good news. It means he's desperate and making mistakes. Desperate men are easier to control. Control how? Through more threats? More destruction of his life? I pulled away, needing space to process the cascading fear. He knows where I am now. He knows I'm with you. That makes everything more dangerous. It makes everything clearer. Antonio's expression had gone cold. Calculating. Dawson declared war by coming to my building. That gives me authorization under family protocols to respond with appropriate force. Another euphemism for violence that my sheltered academic background hadn't prepared me to navigate. You're going to kill him. I'm going to ensure he can never threaten you again. The distinction might seem semantic, but it's important. Antonio pulled out his phone, typing a quick message before returning his attention to me. What happens next is my decision. based on my assessment of threat and my responsibility to protect people under Marchetti care. Your only job is to stay safe while I handle it. I don't want his blood on my hand. The protest felt weak even as I voiced it. Even if he deserves it, even if the world would be better without him, it won't be on your hand. It'll be on mine, where it's been for 15 years along with everyone else who threatened my family's interests. Antonio's voice carried no emotion, just flat acceptance of realities I was only beginning to understand. This is what I am, Emma. This is what being under my protection means. I solve problems that nice people with clean hands can't or won't address. The truth of it hit me like cold water. I'd been pretending that Antonio's protection came without cost, that I could accept his help while maintaining some moral high ground about methods, but that was fantasy. Real protection in his world meant violence, meant blood, meant deaths that would never appear in official records or trouble anyone's conscience except mine. I need air. I moved toward the balcony doors, needing escape from the suffocating weight of decisions I couldn't control. Antonio's hand caught my wrist, his grip firm but not painful. You can't go out there. Not until we're certain Dawson isn't watching the building with a rifle. So I'm a prisoner again. Different cage. Same lack of freedom. The bitterness in my voice made him flinch. You're alive. His voice had gone very quiet, very intense. You're alive because you accepted help instead of clinging to independence that was killing you. You're alive because I have the resources and willingness to do what's necessary. And you'll stay alive because I won't let moral squeamishness about my methods prevent me from keeping you safe. The raw honesty of his statement left me speechless. This was who Antonio Marchetti really was. Not the vulnerable man who'd confessed his mother's death, or the careful host who'd provided dinner and protection. This was the crime boss who'd built and maintained power through calculated violence, who saw threats and eliminated them with the same efficiency most people applied to paying bills. I'm sorry. I don't know why I was apologizing except that it felt necessary. I'm sorry that saving me requires you to become something you might not want to be. Something shifted in his expression, the cold calculation giving way to unexpected vulnerability. I became this person 15 years ago, Emma. Saving you doesn't require me to become anything. It just gives purpose to what I already am. Before I could respond, Sophia appeared with a laptop, her expression urgent. MR, Marchetti, we have movement. Detective Dawson just accessed the building's surveillance system using his police credentials. He's watching the camera feeds. How long has he had access? Antonio's voice had gone dangerously quiet. The unknown. Could be minutes or hours. But he knows the building layout now, knows our security positioning, knows which apartment Miss Carson was in earlier. And then we moved to secondary location. Antonio was already in motion, issuing orders with military precision. Vincent, bring the car to the loading dock. Marco, I want a 4-vehicle convoy with defensive positioning. Sophia, contact the safe house in Evanston and have it prepared for immediate occupation. The organized chaos of evacuation unfolded around me with practiced efficiency. Men appeared with bags I hadn't known were packed, exit routes I hadn't known existed. Within 10 minutes, we were in the service elevator descending to a loading dock I'd never seen. Antonio's hand never left the small of my back, his body positioned between me and potential threats with protective instinct that should have felt possessive but somehow didn't. The convoy consisted of 4 identical black SUVs, making it impossible for outside observers to know which vehicle contained the actual target. Antonio guided me into the second car, sliding in beside me while armed men took positions in the front seats. As we pulled away from the building, I caught a glimpse of Marcus standing across the street, watching the convoy with an expression that mixed rage and triumph. He saw us. My voice emerged as terrified whisper. He knows which car I'm in. No. He saw 4 identical vehicles and made an assumption. Antonio's hand found mine, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness, and that assumption is going to cost him everything. The safe house in Evanston turned out to be a sprawling estate hidden behind walls and mature trees that blocked any view from the street. We'd driven for 45 minutes in silence, Antonio's hand still holding mine while he conducted business in rapid Italian through his earpiece. I understood enough of the language from my undergraduate courses to catch fragments. Surveillance, containment, permanent solution. The words that determined Marcus's fate being decided while I sat helpless in an armored vehicle. The estate's interior was less ostentatious than Antonio's penthouse, more like a family home that happened to have armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Comfortable furniture, lived-in spaces, photographs on tables showing people I assumed were Marchetti family members through multiple generations. It was jarring seeing such normal domesticity in the home of someone who ordered deaths with the casual efficiency most people used to order takeout. This was my grandfather's house, Antonio explained as we entered, his hand still at my back in that protective gesture I'd come to recognize. My father kept it after he died, and I've maintained it for occasions when the penthouse becomes compromised. You'll be safe here. Safe. The word had lost all meaning over the past 36 hours. I didn't feel safe. I felt like a chess piece being moved around a board by players whose rules I didn't understand, pursued by an opponent who'd already demonstrated his willingness to kill me. I need to know what you're planning. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. You keep telling me I'm safe, that you're handling it, but Marcus is watching your buildings and accessing police surveillance. How is any of this making me safer? Because while Detective Dawson was focused on finding you, my people were focused on finding everything he cares about. Antonio guided me to a study lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk. Sophia appeared moments later with a laptop, setting it up with practiced efficiency. Let me show you what real power looks like. The laptop screen filled with surveillance footage from multiple locations. Marcus's apartment, his precinct, his gym, even his mother's house in Oak Park. Each location marked with timestamps and detailed notes about his movements and patterns over the past 24 hours. You've been watching him since last night. The realization made my skin prickle. While I was sleeping in your guest room, you had people following his every move. I had people documenting his life in preparation for dismantling it. Antonio pulled up another window showing financial records, personnel files, and what looked like internal police communications. Detective Dawson's suspension is just the beginning. By tomorrow morning, his bank accounts will be frozen due to suspicious transactions my people have planted. His car will be impounded for unpaid parking violations we've created in the system. And his mother will receive an anonymous package detailing every woman he's abused over the past decade. You're destroying everything. I stared at the screen, watching surveillance footage of Marcus leaving his apartment. With the paranoid awareness of someone who knew he was being hunted, every aspect of his life, piece by piece, I'm demonstrating that he can't win. Antonio's voice carried cold satisfaction. Men like Dawson operate on the assumption that their connections and authority make them untouchable. I'm showing him that my reach extends further than his protection. And then what? He becomes desperate and more dangerous. Cornered animals lash out, Antonio. My criminology training might not have prepared me for living this reality, but it taught me enough to understand escalation patterns, which is why the real operation happens tonight. Antonio pulled up a new window showing what looked like building blueprints. Detective Dawson will receive a message informing him that you're at this location, an apartment in Ukrainian village that I've prepared specifically for this purpose. You're setting a trap. Using me as bait. I'm using the idea of you as bait. You'll be here, surrounded by security that would take a SWAT team to penetrate. Dawson will walk into an apartment containing only my men, where we'll have a conversation about his future options. A conversation. Another euphemism for violence I was becoming too familiar with. You mean you're going to hurt him until he agrees to leave Chicago? I mean, we're going to present him with evidence of his crimes and a choice. Leave the city permanently and maintain his freedom, or refuse and face consequences that extend beyond professional destruction. Antonio's expression had gone cold, detached. This is the option you asked for, Emma. Option 3. Systematic pressure combined with a final ultimatum. He won't accept it. I knew Marcus well enough to understand his psychology. He'd rather die than admit defeat. Rather burn everything down than let someone else win. Then he'll die. The casual delivery of the death sentence made my hands shake, and Chicago will lose one corrupt detective while gaining confirmation that the Marchetti family protects its people absolutely. I turned away from the laptop, unable to keep looking at surveillance footage of a man who'd once made me laugh over morning coffee, who'd seemed charming and protective before the mask slipped. How did you become someone who can talk about killing people so casually? Practice. Antonio's honesty was brutal. My first kill was at 17, a rival family soldier who'd threatened my sister. I threw up afterward, couldn't sleep for weeks. But over time, you learn to compartmentalize, to understand that violence isn't personal. It's just another tool for solving problems that negotiation can't address. That's psychopathic. The accusation hung between us, harsh and uncompromising. That's pragmatic. He moved to the window overlooking gardens that probably bloomed beautifully in summer. I've never killed anyone who wasn't a legitimate threat to my family or organization. Never hurt anyone for pleasure or entertainment. Every act of violence I've committed or ordered served a specific purpose within a framework of rules that have governed my family for generations. And those rules say Marcus has to die. Those rules say threats to family are eliminated permanently. Antonio turned to face me, his storm gray eyes holding mine with uncomfortable intensity. But I'm willing to give him a chance at survival because you asked me to. That's more mercy than he showed you when he put his hands around your throat. The reminder of Marcus's violence sent phantom pain through my neck. I raised my hand to touch the bruises that had faded to yellow-green shadow, visible reminders of how close I'd come to death. Antonio was right. Marcus had shown no mercy, no restraint, no consideration for my life beyond his need to control and dominate. When does this happen? The trap. The confrontation, whatever you're calling it. 10 o'clock tonight. Detective Dawson will receive a text from an anonymous source claiming they saw you entering the Ukrainian village apartment. My men will be in position by 8. He took 3 hours to respond the last time we gave him information, so we anticipate his arrival around 1 in the morning. If he brings backup, other cops who are loyal to him, then my men will handle them accordingly. Non-lethal force for anyone not named Marcus Dawson. I'm not starting a war with the Chicago Police Department over one corrupt detective. The casualness with which he discussed subduing police officers reinforced how different his world was from the one I'd inhabited just 2 days earlier. In Antonio's reality, cops were just another obstacle to be managed, not symbols of law and authority to be respected and obeyed. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her expression professionally neutral. Mia, Marchetti, the team is in position at the Ukrainian village location. All surveillance equipment is functioning properly. We should have full audio and video of any interaction with Detective Dawson. Excellent. Inform Vincent that I want real-time updates on Dawson's movements starting at 9 o'clock. And Sophia, please ensure Emma has everything she needs for a comfortable evening. This might be a long night. After Sophia left, Antonio moved closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I know this isn't the life you imagined for yourself. His voice had soft, losing some of its cold professionalism. I know that accepting my protection means accepting realities you'd rather ignore. But Emma, I need you to understand that everything I'm doing is to ensure you have a future. A life free from fear of the man who tried to take it from you. I do understand. The admission felt like surrender, acceptance of circumstances I couldn't change. I just wish there was a way to guarantee my safety without requiring someone's death. So do I. His hand rose to cup my face, thumb tracing along my cheekbone with surprising gentleness. But wishing for better options doesn't create them. We work with what's available, and sometimes what's available is violence applied with precision and purpose. The touch sent unexpected warmth through my chest. Connection that had nothing to do with protection and everything to do with something I wasn't ready to name. This was dangerous territory. Confusing attraction with gratitude, mistaking intensity for genuine feeling. Antonio was offering safety, yes, but also entanglement in a world where morality was negotiable and violence was currency. I should rest. The excuse felt transparent, but I needed distance to process everything that had happened. Space to think without Antonio's intense presence clouding my judgment. Of course, the guest room is upstairs, second door on the right. I'll have Sophia bring you dinner later. He stepped back, giving me space I'd asked for. And Emma, whatever happens tonight with Dawson, remember that you're not responsible. These are my decisions, based on my assessment of threat. Your conscience remains clear. But as I climbed the stairs toward the guest room, I couldn't shake the feeling that my conscience would never be clear again. That accepting Antonio's protection meant accepting complicity in violence I couldn't prevent or control. That somewhere in Ukrainian village, preparations were being made for a confrontation that would end with either Marcus's surrender or his death. And that was the reason it was happening. The guest room was comfortable and impersonal, decorated in neutral colors that could belong to anyone or no one. I lay on the bed still fully clothed, staring at the ceiling while my mind raced through scenarios and outcomes. Marcus walking into the trap and accepting exile. Marcus fighting back and being killed in the struggle. Marcus bringing reinforcements and turning the confrontation into a bloodbath that would draw police attention and federal investigations. My phone buzzed with an incoming message and my blood turned to ice when I saw it was from Marcus. Despite everything, despite Antonio's security and careful planning, Marcus had found a way to reach me one more time. I know where you are, Emma. I know who's protecting you. And I know that you think I'm going to walk into whatever trap Marchetti has planned. But baby, you've forgotten the most important thing about me. I'm always 3 steps ahead. See you soon. My hands shook as I read the message again, trying to parse meaning from what might be empty bravado or legitimate threat. I should tell Antonio immediately, should show him the message and let him adjust plans accordingly. But something held me back. Maybe it was shame at having led Marcus to Antonio's door. Maybe it was fear that showing this message would trigger the permanent solution I'd been trying to avoid. Or maybe it was the growing certainty that no matter what preparations Antonio made, Marcus wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. And I wasn't sure which outcome terrified me more. I stared at Marcus's message for 10 minutes before my conscience won the battle against my pride. Antonio needed to know. Whatever games Marcus was playing, whatever 3 steps ahead strategy he thought he had, withholding information could get people killed. I found Antonio in the study, surrounded by monitors showing live feeds from the Ukrainian village apartment and the surrounding streets. He looked up when I entered, and something in my expression made him immediately set aside the tablet he'd been reviewing. What happened? His voice carried the sharp focus of someone trained to recognize when situations had shifted. I held out my phone, the message still displayed on the screen. Marcus sent this 20 minutes ago. Antonio read it quickly, his expression darkening with each word. Then he made a call speaking in rapid Italian that I could only partially follow. When he finished, he turned back to me with controlled intensity that suggested he was furious but not at me. How did he get your new number? You changed phones this morning. I don't know. My voice came out small, frightened. It's the only people who have this number are you, Sophia, and my sister Jessica. I called her this afternoon to let her know I was safe. Does your sister know Marcus? Any possibility she'd give him the number? Jessica hates him. She's been telling me to leave him for months. There's no way she'd voluntarily give him anything. But panic was rising in my chest. Horrible possibilities flooding my mind. Unless he threatened her, unless he's using her to get to me. Antonio was already dialing, his movements precise despite the obvious tension in his shoulders. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered, and I recognized my sister's Milwaukee accent. Jessica Carson? This is Antonio Marchetti, calling about your sister Emma. Has anyone contacted you today asking about her location? There was a pause. Then Jessica's voice came through the speaker, confused and concerned. Who is this? How did you get my number? Is Emma okay? Your sister's safe and staying with me while we address some security concerns. I need to know if anyone has contacted you, specifically Detective Marcus Dawson. Marcus called me this morning. He said Emma was in danger and he needed to find her to help. I told him I didn't know where she was, which was true at the time. He got angry, said I was protecting someone who was making a terrible mistake. The fear in Jessica's voice was palpable. Did I do something wrong? You did exactly right by not giving him information. Antonio's tone had gentled, reassuring, but I need you to understand that Detective Dawson is not trying to help help your sister. He's the threat we're protecting her from. I know. I've known since Emma showed up to Christmas dinner last year with bruises she tried to hide under long sleeves. Jessica's voice broke slightly. Is she really safe with you? She's safer with me than she would be anywhere else. I'm going to have someone from my organization contact you within the hour to arrange protective surveillance on your apartment, just as a precaution. After the call ended, Antonio pulled up additional surveillance feeds, his fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. If Dawson has your new number, he has more resources or connections than we anticipated. He's either paying someone inside the phone company or has access to police surveillance tech we didn't account for. So he really is 3 steps ahead. The message wasn't empty bravado. No, he's 1 step ahead, which is already one too many. Antonio stood, pacing to the windows with controlled agitation. But being ahead doesn't mean he wins. It means we adjust strategy and use his confidence against him. How? He knows about the trap. He probably knows you're watching his movement. What advantage do we still have? The advantage of knowing he thinks he's winning. Antonio's expression had shifted, calculation replacing concern. Dawson sent that message to rattle you, to make you doubt my ability to protect you. That kind of psychological warfare only works if he believes you'll panic and do something predictable, like trying to leave, like thinking I'm putting everyone in danger and running to protect them. Exactly. Which is why you're going to stay exactly where you are, surrounded by security that Dawson can't penetrate. His smile was sharp and dangerous, and I'm going to give him what he expects. Panic, visible scrambling, signs that his message achieved its intended effect. You're going to make him think he's winning. I'm going to make him overconfident. Overconfidence leads to mistakes, and mistakes create opportunity. Antonio returned to his monitors, pulling up maps of Chicago with various locations marked in different colors. We move up the timeline. Instead of waiting for him to come to us at 1 in the morning, we draw him out at 10 o'clock when he's expecting us to still be preparing. Won't that be more dangerous? Less time to prepare means more variables you can't control. It also means less time for him to plan whatever counter-strat he thinks he has. Antonio was already typing messages, coordinating with his team through encrypted channel. Vincent, I need the Ukrainian village site ready in 2 hours instead of 4, and I want a second team positioned at Emma's old apartment. If Dawson is smart enough to suspect the obvious trap, he might try the less obvious location first. My old apartment, where Marcus still had keys, where he could access my things, where the neighbors were accustomed to seeing him come and go. The thought of him in my space, touching my belongings with hands that had tried to kill me, made my skin crawl. We should have changed those locks immediately. The criticism came out harsher than I'd intended, fear manifesting as anger. The locks were changed this morning, along with a significant upgrade to the security system and surveillance cameras that cover every entrance. Antonio's voice remained patient, explaining logistics with the same care he might use with a child. If Dawson tries to access your old apartment, he'll trigger alarms and find himself facing armed response within 90 seconds. The casual mention of armed response, the matter-of-fact way Antonio discussed surveillance and strategic positioning, reinforced how completely my life had transformed. 2 days ago, my biggest concern was making rent and avoiding Marcus's increasingly volatile moods. Now I was at the center of an operation involving multiple teams, encrypted communications, and contingency plans that accounted for violence as routine possibility. Sophia appeared with food I couldn't imagine eating, my stomach too knotted with anxiety to consider dinner. She set the tray down with her usual efficiency, but I caught the concerned look she gave Antonio before leaving. You should eat. Antonio pushed the tray closer, his tone suggesting this was one battle he intended to win. Whatever happens tonight, you need your strength. I can't. The admission felt like weakness, but I'd given up pretending to be stronger than I actually was. Every time I close my eyes, I see Marcus's face when he was choking me, the rage in his eyes, the satisfaction he got from watching me suffer. And now he's out there somewhere planning God knows what, and I'm responsible for all of this. You're not responsible for Marcus Dawson's actions. Antonio moved his chair closer, his presence solid and reassuring despite the circumstances. He made choices that led to this moment. He chose violence over communication. He chose domination over partnership. And he chose to continue pursuing you even after being warned away. Those are his decisions, Emma, not yours. But I'm the reason you're involved. I'm the reason your people are risking themselves. If something goes wrong tonight, if someone gets hurt because of me, I don't know how I'll live with that. Then let me tell you how. Antonio's hand found mine, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness. You'll live with it by understanding that the men on my team chose this life. They know the risks, accept them as part of their profession, and they're not risking themselves for you specifically. They're fulfilling their duty to protect someone under Marchetti family protection. That's the code they operate by. It's still violence. Still people potentially dying because I couldn't handle my own problems. Your problem was a corrupt police detective using his badge to terrorize and abuse you. Antonio's voice had gone very quiet, very intense. That's not something you handle on your own, Emma. That's something that requires resources and willingness to act outside systems that failed. And yes, that sometimes means violence. But violence in service of protecting the innocent is different from violence in service of control and domination. The distinction felt important even as I struggled to fully accept it. Antonio's violence came with purpose, with rules. with the intention of stopping someone who'd proven himself willing to kill. Marcus's violence came from need to dominate, to punish, to exert control over someone he viewed as property rather than person. Tell me about your mother. The request came out unexpectedly. A need to understand the woman whose death had shaped Antonio into the man sitting beside me. What was she like before the violence? Something shifted in Antonio's expression, grief and love mixing in ways that made him look younger and more vulnerable. She loved gardens. Every spring, she'd spend weeks planning what to plant, researching which flowers would bloom when, designing color schemes that would last from May through October. He smiled at the memory, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Our backyard looked like something from a magazine. Neighbors would walk by just to admire her work. Did she know what your father did? About the family business? She knew. Everyone in that world knows, even if they don't discuss details at dinner. But she chose to focus on the parts of our life that had nothing to do with violence and crime. The gardens, the family dinners, teaching me and my sister to appreciate beauty in a world that often felt ugly. And the man who killed her, was he part of that world? He was my father's cousin, someone we trusted completely, who ate at our table and celebrated holidays with us. Antonio's voice had gone flat, emotionless in the way of someone recounting trauma they'd processed too many times. For 3 years, he sold information to rival families. By the time we discovered his betrayal, the damage was catastrophic. Multiple operations compromised, 2 family soldiers killed, and my mother poised because she'd overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. I'm so sorry. The words felt inadequate for the magnitude of his loss. It taught me that trust is the most dangerous weapon someone can use against you. Antonio's hand tightened around mine, and it taught me that sometimes violence is the only appropriate response to violence. My father gave his cousin a choice, exile or death. He chose to fight, and my father chose to finish it. Did that help, knowing his killer was dead? No. Nothing helps when someone you love is gone, but it prevented him from hurting anyone else, which mattered. Antonio's storm gray eyes found mine, holding me with uncomfortable intensity. That's what tonight is about, Emma. Not revenge or punishment, prevention, ensuring that Marcus Dawson can't hurt you or any other woman ever again. 10 o'clock arrived with the weight of inevitability. I sat beside Antonio in the study, watching multiple monitors showing different angles of the Ukrainian village apartment and surrounding streets. His team was in position, invisible to casual observers but ready to respond within seconds if Marcus appeared. The waiting was worse than any physical danger I'd faced, imagination conjuring scenarios more terrifying than reality could possibly deliver. Target acquired. Vincent's voice crackled through the speaker system, calm and professional. Detective Dawson just parked 2 blocks east of the location. He's alone on foot approaching from the alley route. Too easy. Antonio's voice carried skepticism that made my stomach clench with fresh anxiety. Dawson knows we're watching. It feels like bait. On the monitor, I watched Marcus move through shadows with the careful awareness of someone trained in tactical operations. He wasn't walking into a trap like an overconfident amateur. He was moving like a man who expected resistance and had planned for it. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair hard enough to leave marks, every muscle in my body tense with anticipation. He's wearing a vest, one of Antonio's men reported, his voice tight with concern, body armor under his jacket, and I'm seeing a bulge that suggests he's carrying more than his service weapon. Of course he is. Marcus had come prepared for war, not for negotiation or surrender. The realization made my chest tight with fear for Antonio's men who were waiting in that apartment, expecting a confrontation with a desperate man, but possibly facing someone who'd planned this as carefully as Antonio had planned the trap. Pull back. Antonio's command was immediate, decisive. All teams maintain distance and surveillance only. Do not engage unless he fires first. Sir, he's at the building entrance. Should we abort? Negative. Let him enter. I want to see what he does when he realizes the apartment is empty. Empty? But I thought your men were supposed to be there waiting to confront him. Change of plans. Antonio's expression remained fixed on the monitors, calculating possibilities with the rapid assessment of someone for whom tactical decisions were second nature. If Dawson came prepared for a firefight, we don't give him one. We let him walk into an empty apartment and wait to see his next move. The surveillance feed showed Marcus entering the building, his movements efficient and controlled as he bypassed the security system with ease that suggested either police training or prior surveillance of the location. He climbed the stairs rather than using the elevator, maintaining tactical advantage by controlling his route and timing. At the apartment door, he paused, listening before using what looked like a lockpick set to gain entry. He's inside. Vincent confirmed what we could all see on the monitors, scanning the rooms. He knows it's empty. I watched Marcus move through the apartment with weapon drawn, checking corners and closets with the thoroughness of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. When he finally holstered his gun and pulled out his phone, I knew we were about to see his real plan unfold. You thought I was that stupid, Marchetti. Marcus's voice came through the apartment surveillance system, speaking directly into his phone camera as if he knew Antonio was watching. You thought I'd walk into your trap without insurance, without leverage that actually matters? He's stalling. Antonio leaned forward, his focus absolute. Vincent, check for additional vehicles in the area. He didn't come alone. Sir, we have movement at the Evanston location. The words sent ice through my veins, cold terror flooding every nerve. 2 vehicles just breached the perimeter gate, armed men exiting. They're heading for the main house. This was never about Ukrainian village. The realization hit me and Antonio simultaneously. Marcus had known about the trap because it was exactly what he'd wanted us to focus on while he sent his real team to the one place we'd told him I'd be safe, the Evanston estate that had been Antonio's grandfather's house. How many? Antonio was already moving, pulling a weapon from a desk drawer with practiced efficiency. 6 confirmed, armed with automatic weapons. Our perimeter team is engaging, but they're outnumbered. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her expression urgent. "Sir, we need to move Miss Carson to the safe room immediately." "No," I stood, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Marcus wants me to hide. He wants me terrified and helpless while his people tear through your security. That's the whole point of his plan. Then we give him exactly what he doesn't expect." Antonio's hand found my arm, pulling me toward the door with controlled urgency. "Come with me. Stay close and do exactly as I say." The sounds of gunfire reached us before we made it to the hallway, sharp cracks echoing through the house that had seemed so peaceful just hours earlier. Antonio's security team was engaging Marcus's people with professional efficiency, but the attackers had surprise and superior firepower on their side. We moved through the house using what Antonio called the family route, a path between walls and through hidden passages that his grandfather had installed during Prohibition. "Where are we going?" My voice came out as a terrified whisper, barely audible over the sounds of combat above us. "Somewhere Marcus won't expect." Antonio pushed open a hidden door that led to what looked like a wine cellar, and somewhere that gives us the tactical advantage when he inevitably comes looking for you himself. He's coming here, but the apartment in Ukrainian village, his men attacking the house, I thought that was his plan. That was his distraction. Antonio guided me down stone steps into a cellar that extended far beyond what should have been possible, given the house's footprint. The real plan is, and always has been, taking you directly. Everything else is just noise designed to divide my attention and resource. The cellar opened into something that looked more like a bunker than wine storage. Computer equipment lined one wall, weapons racks another, and a heavy steel door at the far end suggested this space had been designed for exactly this kind of scenario. Antonio moved immediately to a control panel, pulling up surveillance feeds that showed the battle still raging upstairs. "Your men," panic made my voice sharp. "They're dying because of me. They're fighting because it's what they're trained and paid to do." Antonio's tone remained calm despite the circumstances. "And they're buying us time for backup to arrive. Vincent is 3 minutes out with a full tactical team. 3 minutes might as well have been 3 hours. On the monitors, I watched Marcus's people move through the house with military precision, systematically clearing rooms and advancing toward what they probably assumed was the master bedroom where I'd be hiding. Antonio's security team was holding defensive positions, making the attackers pay for every foot of ground, but they were clearly outgunned. "This is my fault." The words escaped before I could stop them, guilt crushing my chest with physical weight. "I should have known Marcus wouldn't make it easy. Should have realized he'd escalate instead of accepting defeat." "You couldn't have known because you're not a strategist trained in tactical operations." Antonio pulled a weapon from the rack, checking it with the automatic efficiency of someone for whom guns were tools rather than threats. But I should have anticipated this. Should have prepared for the possibility that Dawson had resources we didn't account for." "What resources?" "He's a suspended cop with anger problems, not a military commander. He's a suspended cop with 8 years in tactical operations and connections throughout the criminal underworld, from his time in organized crime investigations." Antonio's voice carried frustrated admiration for an opponent he'd underestimated. "The kind of connections that let him hire experienced mercenaries for exactly this kind of operation." Mercenaries. The word made everything worse. These weren't just corrupt cops helping a friend. These were professionals motivated by money rather than loyalty. People who'd have no hesitation about killing anyone in their path to complete a contract. The gunfire above intensified, then abruptly stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the combat sounds had. On the monitors, I watched Marcus's team regroup in what had been the main living area, their formations suggesting they were preparing for a final push toward wherever they believed their target was hiding. "They're coming." My voice emerged as a whisper, stating the obvious but needing to say it aloud. "Let them come." Antonio positioned himself between me and the cellar entrance, weapon held with the comfortable familiarity of someone who'd used it many times before. This room was designed to withstand assault from 20 men. 6 mercenaries and 1 arrogant cop don't stand a chance. But before I could respond, Marcus's voice echoed through the house's intercom system, somehow having accessed the building's communication infrastructure. "Emma, baby, I know you can hear me. I know Marchetti has you hidden somewhere in this house. And I know he's watching on his fancy surveillance system." The sound of his voice, that same voice that had whispered sweet things during good times and terrible things during bad times, made my entire body shake. Antonio's hand found mine, squeezing gently in silent support. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, his tone carrying the false reasonableness I'd learned to recognize as his most dangerous mood. "You're going to come out. You're going to walk away with me, and Marchetti's going to let you go. Because if you don't, Emma, I'm going to burn this house down with everyone inside it, and then I'm going to visit your sister in Milwaukee. I'm going to have a long conversation with Jessica about family loyalty." The threat against Jessica hit like a physical blow. Antonio felt me tense, his grip tightening in warning not to do anything impulsive. "You have 2 minutes to make your decision, Emma. 2 minutes before I start executing Marchetti's people one by one until you come out. The first one will be that efficient assistant of his, Sophia, I think her name is. Pretty woman. Shame to waste her." On the monitors, I could see Sophia being held at gunpoint by one of Marcus's mercenaries, her expression calm despite the weapon pressed against her temple. She'd been caught during the initial breach, separated from the main security team. "He has Sophia." The panic in my voice was absolute. "Antonio, we have to do something. We have 1 minute 40 seconds before Vincent arrives with backup." Antonio's voice remained steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched with suppressed fury. "We hold this position. I can't let him hurt Sophia." The words came out before I'd fully processed the decision. But once spoken, they felt inevitable. "She helped me because you asked her to. I won't let her die for that. No." Antonio's grip on my arm tightened, his voice carrying desperate urgency I'd never heard from him before. "That's exactly what Dawson wants. The moment you surface, he takes you, and we lose all tactical advantage. And if I don't, he executes her, then your other people. Then he burns the house down anyway because that's who Marcus is. He doesn't bluff, Antonio. When he makes a threat, he follows through. Vincent is 90 seconds out." Antonio pulled up the surveillance feed showing vehicles approaching at high speed. "We can hold this position for 90 seconds. Can Sophia?" I pointed at the monitor where Marcus's mercenary had forced her to her knees, the gun now pressed against the back of her head, execution style. "Can you promise me she'll survive 90 more seconds with a gun to her skull?" The anguish in Antonio's expression told me he couldn't make that promise. We both knew that Marcus was unstable enough and angry enough to start killing people just to prove he could, just to demonstrate that his power to destroy exceeded Antonio's power to protect. "Time's up, Emma." Marcus's voice carried false patience through the intercom. "I'm disappointed but not surprised. You always were too selfish to think about other people's suffering. This one's on you, baby. I'm coming out." The words escaped before Antonio could stop me, loud enough to carry through the bunker. "Don't hurt anyone else. I'm coming out right now. Emma, don't." Antonio's protest was immediate, but I was already moving toward the cellar stairs. His hand caught my wrist, pulling me back with controlled force. "You go up there and he kills you anyway, along with everyone else because he can't leave witnesses. Then I guess we find out if your backup arrives in time." I met his storm gray eyes, seeing my own fear reflected back at me, but I'm not letting people die for me. Not Sophia, not your security team, not anyone. This ends now. Something shifted in Antonio's expression, calculation replacing desperation. "You're right, this does end now." His hand released my wrist, moving instead to the weapons rack where he selected what looked like a small remote control, but not the way Dawson expects. "What is that?" "Insurance my grandfather installed and my father maintained." Antonio's smile was sharp and dangerous. "This house has more secrets than just hidden passages and bunkers." He pressed a button, and on the monitors, I watched gas begin seeping from vents throughout the main floor. The mercenaries noticed immediately, their tactical training recognizing the threat. Marcus grabbed Sophia, using her as a shield while backing toward what he thought was an exit. "It's not lethal," Antonio explained as we watched the attackers' movements become sluggish, their coordination failing as the sedative took effect. Fast-acting sedative that my grandfather used during Prohibition when federal agents raided the house. Knocks people unconscious within 30 seconds, wears off after an hour with no permanent effects. On the monitors, Marcus fought the effects longer than his mercenary. Rage and adrenaline keeping him mobile even as his hired guns collapsed around him. But chemistry was stronger than willpower. His grip on Sophia loosened, the gun falling from nerveless fingers as he stumbled and finally dropped to his knees. "Vincent's team is breaching now," Antonio reported, watching his backup flood through the front entrance with weapons drawn and gas masks in place. "They'll secure everyone and transfer Dawson to a secondary location for the conversation we originally planned." The conversation about his future options. I remembered our earlier discussion, option 3 that gave Marcus a chance to accept exile rather than death. "Is that still on the table? After he attacked your home and threatened to kill your people?" Antonio was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the monitor showing Marcus's unconscious form being zip-tied and searched by Vincent's team. "My grandfather used to say that showing mercy wasn't weakness, it was power. Killing someone proves you can end a life. Letting them live with consequences proves you control their entire existence. So you're still going to offer him exile?" "I'm going to make him understand that the alternative to accepting my terms is far worse than death." Antonio turned to face me, his expression carrying weight of decisions that would determine Marcus's fate. "And then I'm going to let him choose, just like my father gave his cousin a choice." We waited in the bunker while Antonio's people cleared the house and secured all prisoners. Sophia appeared 20 minutes later, disheveled but unharmed, her composure already returning despite having faced execution moments earlier. She gave me a slight nod as she passed, acknowledgement between women who'd both survived situations they'd never expected to face. Marcus regained consciousness in what Antonio called the conversation room. A space that looked like a normal sitting area but had been soundproofed and equipped with security measures that ensured nothing that happened inside would ever reach the outside world. I watched from an adjacent room through one-way glass as Marcus was secured to a chair, his wrists zip-tied and his ankles bound. Antonio entered alone, moving with the controlled grace I'd come to recognize as his combat mode. He didn't speak immediately, just let the silence stretch while Marcus's eyes adjusted and his drug-fogged brain processed his circumstances. "You made a critical error tonight, Dawson." Antonio's voice carried no emotion, just flat assessment of facts. "You escalated a situation that could have ended with your exile and freedom into one that now requires permanent resolution." "Fuck you, Marchetti." Marcus's voice was hoarse from the sedative, but his rage remained intact. "You think you can threaten me? I'm a cop. I have brothers who will burn your whole organization to the ground when they find out what you did. Your brothers abandoned you this afternoon when Internal Affairs suspended you pending investigation. The evidence we provided was thorough enough that even your loyal friends couldn't ignore it." Antonio pulled up his phone, showing Marcus something I couldn't see from my position. "And the mercenaries you hired? They're currently providing detailed testimony about who hired them and for what purpose. It turns out loyalty purchased with money disappears quickly when offered better compensation and immunity from prosecution." I watched Marcus's expression shift from rage to calculation to the first hints of fear as he realized the scope of his situation. Antonio continued speaking, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Here are your options. Option 1, you accept exile from Chicago. You move to a city of our choosing, begin a new life under our supervision, and never contact Emma Carson or anyone associated with her again. You'll be comfortable, but monitored. Any violation of terms results in immediate implementation of Option 2. And Option 2? Marcus's question came out as a whisper, the bravado finally cracking. "Option 2 involves you disappearing so completely that not even advanced forensic analysis will ever connect your remains to the person you used to be." Antonio leaned forward, his storm gray eyes boring into Marcus with terrifying intensity. "I spent the past 2 days documenting every woman you've abused, every regulation you've violated, every case you've corrupted. You're not a good cop gone bad, Dawson. You're a predator who hid behind a badge. And predators who threaten what's mine don't get second chances." The casual way Antonio claimed ownership of me should have bothered me more than it did. But watching Marcus finally understand that he'd lost, that his power and connections meant nothing against Antonio's resources and willingness to act, I felt something that might have been vindication. "I'll take Option 1. Marcus's surrender was complete, the fight draining from him as he confronted the reality of his choices. "I'll leave. Just let me live. You'll do more than leave." Antonio straightened, his posture relaxing slightly as the negotiation concluded on his terms. "You'll sign documents transferring any claim on Emma Carson. You'll provide testimony that clears her of any involvement in tonight's events. And you'll spend the rest of your life understanding that your survival is conditional on behavior I deem acceptable." 6 months later, I stood in that same bunker, now converted into Antonio's home office, reviewing psychological profiles of potential security recruits. My graduate degree in criminology had found unexpected application in the Marchetti. My ability to read behavioral patterns making me invaluable for vetting personnel and identifying potential threats before they materialized. Marcus was in Seattle working security for a warehouse and living in a studio apartment under Marchetti's surveillance. Monthly reports confirmed he was adhering to terms of his exile, his life reduced to the small, controlled existence he'd tried to force on. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. My relationship with Antonio had evolved beyond protector and protected into something neither of us had anticipated. Partnership built on mutual respect and understanding that both of us carried darkness from our pasts. He'd shown me his world with complete honesty, never pretending that loving him wouldn't mean accepting realities most people never confronted. And I'd shown him that intelligence and compassion could coexist with pragmatic acceptance of necessary violence. "You're staring at that profile like it personally offended you." Antonio's voice came from the doorway, warm with amusement. "What's wrong with candidate 7? Micro-expressions during the loyalty question suggests deception, specifically increased blinking rate and involuntary lip compression when discussing hypothetical conflicts between personal relationships and organizational duty." I set down the file, turning to face the man who'd saved my life and then given me purpose beyond survival. "He's got divided loyalties that will eventually become a liability. Your ability to read people continues to impress me." Antonio crossed the room, his arms wrapping around me from behind in a gesture that had become comfortable rather than possessive. "Sophia mentioned you correctly identified 3 potential security risks this month before they could be hired. Just applying my education in useful ways." I leaned back against his solid warmth, feeling safe in ways I'd never imagined possible. "Turns out criminology training translates well to organized crime prevention." His laugh rumbled through his chest into my back. The irony of a criminology student becoming essential to a crime family's operations isn't lost on me. "Former criminology student, current security consultant to a rapidly legitimizing business empire," I corrected, referencing Antonio's ongoing efforts to transition Marchetti operations toward legal enterprises. Though I suppose the distinction doesn't matter much when people know who we really are. We're exactly who we've always been, Emma. People who refuse to let broken systems dictate how we protect the people we care about. Antonio pressed a kiss to my temple, the gesture tender despite his dangerous reputation. And I care about you more than I've cared about anything in 15 years. The confession still had power to make my heart race. Even after months of hearing similar sentiments, I turned in his arms, meeting those storm gray eyes that had first noticed bruises I'd tried to hide and offered protection I'd been too desperate to refuse. I love you too. The words came easier now than they had the first time I'd said them. Even though loving you means accepting a world I never wanted to be part of, but you're part of it now, through your presence and perspective. His smile carried genuine warmth, vulnerability he showed only to me. My mother would have liked you. Would have appreciated how you challenged me to be better than the violence that shaped me. Above us in the renovated Evanston estate that had become our home, life continued with the peculiar normalcy of organized crime domesticity. Sophia coordinated operations from her office. Security teams rotated shifts with military precision, and I'd somehow become the woman who reviewed psychological profiles over morning coffee while discussing tactical operations as casually as other couples discuss weekend plan. This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I'd dropped that cup of coffee and apologized with shaking hands. But watching Antonio's face softened with love earned through surviving darkness together, I understood that sometimes the best lives are the ones we never planned, the ones that emerge from chaos and choice, built on foundations of mutual protection and acceptance of complicated truths. My hands no longer shook, and the bruises had faded completely, replaced by the gentle marks of Antonio's touch when he held me through nightmares that still occasionally surfaced. We'd both been shaped by violence. Both carried scars that would never fully heal, but together we'd built something that felt remarkably like redemption, or at least like the possibility of it, which was more than either of us had dared hope for when a clumsy waitress and a dangerous man first recognized the damage in each other's eyes and chose connection over isolation.